This is a topic that I absolutely love talking about. It's very, very, very dear to my heart. The body's secret cry. So today I'm going to be running you through how to connect to and regulate your nervous system to create a thriving life. So before I kick off, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Briana Bowley. I've spent 12 years in the coaching and bodywork industries, specialising in nervous system regulation. And I work predominantly with 6 to 8 figure entrepreneurs, elite athletes, a lot of world champions, and specifically in extreme sports. That's my favorite niche to work in. And the reason why these two particular niches are relevant here is because what I know to be true is that my work is pressure tested. So I've literally tested this under the most extreme of circumstances so that it is relevant to everything that's lesser than the extreme, right? So, my work covers stress, it covers any sort of pressure all the way up to the most extreme cases. So connecting to yourself and your body. What we're going to run through today is I'm going to support you in basically mapping out your survival and stress mechanisms through a guided somatic experience. And my intention is that you'll come to understand how your thought and behavior patterns manifest themselves physically and emotionally. So let me start off with, we're going to peel it right back to basics. So what is the nervous system? In a nutshell, the nervous system is a complex network of neurons that carry messages from the body to the brain and vice versa. What a lot of people don't know is that 80% of those nerve fibers run from the body up to the brain and only 20% run from the brain down to the body. So what I see in the self-development world a lot at the moment is this heavy focus on mindset. But when we consider that, mindset is only 20% of the pie. 80% is actually the body communicating with the brain. So what we sense in the body determines the way we think. So here's a fun one. We never actually experience the world. All we ever experience is our own nervous system. So what this means is that the state from which we operate, if we're in a survival state, if that's going to be reflected in our outside world, right? It's only ever a mirror image of our nervous system, of our state. So nervous system regulation refers to the ability to adapt to changes in our environment. So it could be something as simple as, a shift in the weather, right? Our ability to adapt and regulate to a shift in the weather. It could be something like a sudden unexpected change in traffic, our ability to adapt to that. It could be a change in the financials, in the economic kind of situation, right? Globally, our ability to adapt to that. So it's literally across the board, our ability to shift and adapt to any changes in our world. So a healthy nervous system is adaptable, it's flexible, and it discharges stress quickly. So I'm talking within 10 minutes. Our nervous system's actually not designed to carry an ongoing load of stress, and I'll explain why soon. And I want to just kind of hit home here, and we're going to get into the stress responses in a moment, but I want to really hit home that a lot of the time it's our inability to discharge that kind of creates this perpetual cycle. And we live in a world now where we have constant stressful stimulus. Our attention is being pulled in a million different directions all at once. And the nervous system is very slow to adapt. And so when we consider that our nervous system was actually created to operate in an environment where, like, we're hanging out in a cave, eating berries, hanging out with our tribe, we're not built to, be answering to this all the time, to be answering to stimulus coming in through notifications and social media and the constant stresses of our jobs and so on and so forth. And so I don't want you to hear in any of this that stress responses are bad or something to avoid. Rather, what I want you to hear is that when you are in a perpetual state of stress and you're unable to discharge it, that is when they become bad. But all in all, your fight, flight, freeze response are actually there to keep you alive. So they're a good thing. A healthy nervous system is one that is adaptable, it's flexible, it's able to go into these stress responses and then quickly discharge them. So I want to start off by telling you a story. This is my pet rat, Mr. J. Well, he was my childhood pet rat. And unfortunately, today's story isn't a happy one. But I want to give you a really clear understanding of your state. So many, many years ago, as I said, Mr. J was my childhood pet rat. And he was a really like chilled out, happy little rat. He would kind of scamper around and he was very cute. I would feed him almonds and he would kind of hold them and just, chew at them, and cutest little rat ever. But one day I noticed that his behavior shifted and suddenly he was scampering around his cage in this kind of like high strung, stressed out state. And even when I would go, and Mr. J loved cuddles, right? So I would pick him up and he would climb into, the pocket in the front of my hoodie and just relax there. But I noticed even when I did that, he still wouldn't calm down. He was still climbing all over the place and he just wouldn't stay still. And so I knew that there was something wrong. And so I took him to the vet, and unfortunately the vet found a tumor, and they told me that Mr. J didn't have long to live. And so I explained the behavior, I said, well, this is what I've observed from him. Like, why is that? If he's dying, why is he more active than ever before? And she explained to me that in the wild, a rat that is still becomes prey, right? A rat that is still and not moving is potential prey to overhead birds, to predators that are flying over, right? And so what he was doing was, because he was unwell, he was actually constantly moving so that he wasn't preyed upon, right? Of course, Mr. J, what he didn't know was that he was safe. He was in an environment that was safe. But unfortunately, animal brains don't work that way, right? So he was in this perpetual survival state, this stress state, this high-strung state, which had him need to keep moving in order to survive. Which brings me to the overhead predator, the eagle. Now, I think this is a really tangible viewpoint, right? This is a really tangible perspective, and I want you to really just envision this. The difference between Mr. J scampering it around his cage fearfully, moving from shadow to shadow to make sure that he's not caught, that he's not preyed upon, versus the eagle. Now, the eagle is highly intentional. The eagle is very mindful about its energy expenditure. Right? Now, the eagle has no natural predators, right? So the eagle operates from this state of safety. And when the eagle's hunting, what you'll see is they get this broad vantage point, right? They fly right up so that they can see everything. And they just kind of cruise. And it's this very relaxed, very powerful. If you've ever seen an eagle in the wild, they've got this really kind of stunning flight pattern where they just kind of cruise along. And it's not until they actually see the thing that they're aiming for, the prey, that they suddenly spring into action, right? And then once they've got their prey and done with it what they will, they return to just gliding. So they're extremely intentional with their energy expenditure. And part of this is because they have no natural predators, no known natural predators. So we're going to do a little somatic experience here. If it's available, I invite you to close your eyes. If you're driving or whatever, then definitely don't close your eyes. But just stay with me here and do the best you can in imagining this. So I want you to imagine for a moment that something has really gotten under your skin and pissed you off. And it's bringing up maybe frustration, maybe anger. And I want you to just tune into what you feel in your body. I want you to notice what responses come up in your body, maybe what thoughts pop into your mind. And you might want to think of maybe a real experience that's happened recently, ideally one that's not too emotionally charged, but just enough. So you might notice that, tense muscles. I know that my hands start to get sweaty, right? And it's almost like my body temperature heats up just slightly. My skin starts to get a little bit clammy. When I'm really angry, I know that I can start to get red. I notice that I start to get almost like, it's very subtle, but my heartbeat starts to speed up. Churning stomach. Yeah. Beautiful. All right. So just take a moment, open your eyes and just kind of shake that one out. So we want to kind of reset. And just think for a moment, like if you were to imagine that state as an animal, what animal would it be? So for me, when I'm in anger, I think of it's a lioness. Right? When I'm in that state where something's really pissed me off, I'm a hungry lioness. So it might be a snake attacking for you. Now, no right or wrong answer here, but just kind of have that animal in the back of your head. All right. Now I want you to, again, close your eyes if it's available to you. And I want you to imagine a time when something has triggered you enough that you want out. And again, you may want to think of a real situation, ideally something that's not too emotionally charged. Maybe think of something that's like a 4 out of 10 rather than a 7 or an 8. So think of something that has annoyed you enough that you want out. And yeah, toxic workplace. It's funnily enough, that's exactly what comes into my mind. I always think of like the boss that's at me about a maybe a deadline or something and doesn't communicate in a way that's conducive. It could be maybe you've had an argument with your partner, or the kids are annoying you, or whatever it may be, something that has you want out. And again, I want you to notice the feelings that come up in the body. Notice how your body responds. So again, and no right or wrong here, everyone's very different. I notice that similar feeling, my palms start to get sweaty. My heart rate elevates. My body temperature goes up a little bit. But the subtlety here is that for me, I feel this almost like, it's almost like a flighty feeling right in just underneath my sternum, right in my diaphragm there. And so I want you to imagine if this was an animal, again, what animal would it be? So in this case, funnily enough, for me, my animal here is the gazelle. When I want out, when something's triggered me enough that I want out, I immediately feel like a gazelle trying to outrun a lioness. Funny that. And so just opening your eyes, shaking it out. Last one. So again, closing your eyes. Now I want you to picture that something's happened where you just can't even bring yourself to get out of bed. And again, this may be a real situation in your life, but you just have no motivation. Maybe something's upset you. Maybe you've been through a breakup. Maybe there's a situation happening that's just so overwhelming that you're like, I don't even know what to do. And so you don't want to get out of bed. And maybe it's not quite that extreme, but if there's something that, sort of brings up this like, what do I do? Then go there. And I want you to feel into, again, the responses in your body. Notice how your body responds. So for me, I notice that it's almost like I start to suddenly get cold. It's like all of the blood flow has kind of just left my extremities, and suddenly I feel cold. I almost get like a shiver, and I feel my shoulders kind of droop a little bit, and I feel heavy, and I can feel behind the back of my eyes almost this feeling like I want to cry. And it may be different for you, so there's no right or wrong here, but just noticing. All right, just taking a deep breath, opening your eyes, shaking it out, maybe just check in with your jaw, give it a little wiggle. Oh, actually, I apologize. I want you to think of now, what animal did that feel like? So for me, I think of a possum. I think of a possum playing dead. I don't know if you've ever seen a possum that's like in fear. They play dead or they freeze. All right, last one. And this is a fun one. I'll just check the chat. Puppy. Oh, I love that. Cute. Cute. Okay, so again, closing your eyes. And I want you to imagine that you're feeling so incredibly grateful and in love with your life. And hopefully you get to connect with a very real experience here, but just think of like, oh, everything's working out in your favor. All of these things that you've been seeking and desiring are just happening for you. Notice how your body responds. So you can probably hear it in my voice as I'm telling you about it, right? As I'm speaking this through, I'm more chipper. There's my tone increases. I'm more here. I feel lighter. I feel more playful. I'm more relaxed. My body temperature's come back up, but this time it's not hot. It's just a nice warmth. Open to new ideas. Beautiful. I just feel really at ease. Like I'm at home here. This is fun. And again, if this was an animal, what animal would it be? So for me, this is a puppy. It's that playful little puppy. All right. And we're not going to shake that one out because we get to stay there. So I want you to think of what state do you operate from the most? Out of those 4 animals, which one do you think that you live from the most? I know for me, I'm a blend of the lioness and the puppy. They're my main 2. I drop into possum occasionally when I'm a bit overloaded, but mostly puppy, a little bit of lioness in there. So this is an insight into your primary state, the state from which you operate from, how you interact with the world, and as a result, what you're having reflected back to you in the world. So let's dig into what these mean. So we're going to start with, and excuse the not so lovely photos, but it's easier if I give you a visual. So we've got a dorsal vagus response to start off with. Now, this is the I can't get out of bed response, right? So this is, for me, the possum playing dead. Now, our dorsal vagus response is your freeze response. We commonly hear it referred to as the freeze response. And the freeze response is the most primitive of all the responses. It's very imprecise. It's very slow. So it's a slow reaction, right? If you've ever seen maybe, for those of you who are in Australia, maybe you've seen when you're a kangaroo, when it gets caught in headlights, it's like, and deer do it as well, you know, so it's quite slow reacting. It's that kind of like, there's nothing. It seems like there's not a lot going on. So it's very imprecise, very reptilian. So we see it here with snakes, and it comes through as a lack of energy, right? And it's one of our survival responses. And so we see it in the wild as this snake playing dead. I think, I can't remember what this called. It's a eastern hognose, I think it's called. And this particular snake will actually, like, as you can see here, flop onto its back, and it will flop around for a little bit, and then it will just play dead. And the intent of the dorsal vagus response is to freeze until the threat goes away. All right. Occasionally we see this in gazelles, zebras, when they're being hunted, they freeze. We see it in lizards. How this shows up in humans: fainting. That's excessive. That's a strong dorsal vagus response. Procrastination, playing dead. That doesn't show up so much in humans, but again, in extreme cases, a lack of motivation, a lack of focus. So dare I say it, a lot of ADHD is actually a symptom of a dorsal vagus response in a way. Depression, numbing, disassociation, avoidance, self-depreciation, doubt, hopelessness, shame. And so it's more of kind of your shutdown response. So maybe you notice as we work through that process together, or the I can't get out of bed process, maybe you notice that some of your thoughts were like, what's the point? I can't do this. I can't figure it out. This is hopeless, right? And so this can come through in our behavior as things like binging, addiction, digestive issues, chronic pain. So chronic pain is telling us that, oh, you're actually disassociating here. And it's actually your body trying to signal to you that you need to land back in your body. Things like low blood pressure, poor circulation. And so I should note here, and forgive me, I should have said this earlier, the nervous system is connected to every single organ in your body, right? The vagus nerve, the main nerve of the nervous system, is connected to every single organ in your body. And so a lot of the time, what we think are health issues are actually a result of the state from which we've been operating, right? So digestive issues, the dorsal vagus response is heavily connected to our digestion. So a lot of IBS, things like that, gut issues, poor nutrient absorption, it's a shutdown response being reflected through our gut. Then we have a sympathetic response. Now, these are your fight or flight response is how they're commonly referred to. Much more fast moving, far more precise. So if we come back to the kangaroo and the headlights, sometimes kangaroos will have that moment where they're just frozen. Other times they're like fast moving, right? That's the difference between your dorsal vagus or your freeze response, the kangaroo in the headlights, the deer in the headlights, versus the get me out of here. So it's an overload of energy, and it's still amygdala based. It's still the animal brain, okay? So in the wild, we see this as, if you've ever witnessed maybe a dog being backed into a corner, and they do this here, they snarl and they're getting ready to bite. That's your fight response. Then we have gazelles, zebras, I forget what these are called, with the horns. That's your flight response. Get me out of here. It's not safe. And these are both popping up to have us escape the threat. I will fight back until the threat passes, or I will run and get out of here to avoid the threat. In humans, this is anxiety. So fast beating heart, overwhelm, so much to do, so much to do, so much to do, right? Jitters, nervousness, blame. So blame is your fight response coming through, right? It's his fault. He didn't do this. She didn't communicate, so on and so forth, right? Fight. Avoidance, again, ADHD, so that like can't concentrate, so much going on, right? Sympathetic response. I know I've mentioned that in both the sympathetic and the dorsal. It can be because it's a blend, depending on how it shows up for the individual. So it's that go, go, go energy. It comes through as anger and also that desire to run. So in the sympathetic response, all the blood gets pushed out into our extremities. And that's where, you know, it's giving us the power, the strength, the energy to either fight or to get out of there. So again, this can come through in humans as digestive issues. So this is like an overactive digestion. So a lot of the time, and apologies for kind of going there, but when someone has diarrhea, it's generally they're in a sympathetic response because the body's pushing things through quickly. And, you know, so it's sort of it's that fast moving response. An inability to sit still, high blood pressure, autoimmune disorders. So autoimmune disorders is generally that fight response. It's the body fighting itself. I'm going to touch on this very quickly because I don't want to overload you guys too much, but then we have our blended states. And this is far easier to explain with a car analogy than an animal analogy. So we're going to change speeds for a moment here. But we have our blended states. And in this case, this particular blended state, we're looking at your dorsal vagus response, handbrake on. The brake is on. I'm not moving, freeze. With the accelerator push down, your sympathetic response, go, go, go. Either fight or flee, right? And so when these two, and this is where most people live from unknowingly, because we're overwhelmed, but then we have the phone pinging and notifications coming in and everyone pulling at us and deadlines looming and so on and so forth. And so we're in this perpetual blended state. And so this comes through as overwhelm, chronic stress, an eventual inability to access your ventral vagus state, which I'm going to speak on in a moment. And also, you know, like a lot of our like really chronic health issues come from having the handbrake on and the accelerator pushed down. Inevitable burnout, right? When we have the handbrake pulled on, the accelerator pushed down, we're just burning fuel. We're burning through fuel. We're there's a lot of smoke, but not a lot happening. All right. And Rita says thyroid. Yeah, that can be associated with both states. Depends on how it's kind of the symptoms showing up for the individual. Okay, I'm going to touch on this really quickly as well, because this is a bit of a what came first, the chicken or the egg situation. So as children, we don't actually have the ability to self-regulate. Instead, we co-regulate. We learn how to regulate ourselves through our parents or our primary caregivers. And it becomes a learnt way of doing things. So for me, bless my parents, my mum used to operate from more of a sympathetic response. My mum was very, love her dearly, high strung, stressed out, go, go, go. My dad's survival mechanism was more of a disassociate, numb out, food. Turn to food, right? Turn to beer. And so I learned, it was a learnt state for me, that was how I navigate stress. The beauty of this is that we can unlearn that. And this is where nervous system regulation and somatic work comes into play. We can unlearn this stuff. So please don't hear that as like a life sentence. If you've picked up some kind of dysfunctional regulation patterns. The other piece is structural dysfunction. And so keep in mind, the nervous system is actually a it's a structure. It's a physical structure. I think a lot of the time we hear nervous system and we think that it's some concept. It is actually a physical structure, just like any other, organ or so on in your body. And so sometimes dysregulated states, so survival patterns and chronic stress states, are actually a result of a structural dysfunction. So, prime example, I'm going to turn on my side so you can see this. What do we spend most of our day doing? Right? And I hope you notice my posture here. Sitting, texting. If the nervous system connects to the brain here at the base, and I'm sitting like this all day, every day, it's actually cutting off the nervous system's ability to get messages through clearly. And so as a result, dysregulation over time. Or it could be that maybe you've had an accident at some point. Maybe you've, twisted your spine or something's happened at some point. You've had a fall and that's actually created some sort of a postural shift. That can also be what kicks off a dysregulation pattern. And then the two start to feed each other, so that it could be that postural dysfunction becomes a learned state. I hope that makes sense. Feel free to pop in the chat if you've got questions there. Okay, what do we got next? Last one, we have our ventral vagus state. And I always leave this to lucky last because this is the state that I ideally want to leave you in. So our ventral vagus state is our play state. It's our safety state. It's when we feel relaxed, we feel calm, we feel open. It's the seat of our power. It's when we're able to, someone said it before, creative ideas. It's when we're able to access creativity, problem solving, and it's a function of the executive center of the brain. So our prefrontal cortex. So we've got the amygdala, the animal brain, and then we've got the part of us as humans that allows us to think about what we're thinking about. It's the thing that separates us from animals. When we're in our ventral vagus state, we're anchored in our power, our purpose, our self-worth. We're confident and we're able to access play and pleasure. So I love this example, the lions, or you see dogs do this. Dogs feel really safe at home when they show their stomach, when they lay and do that. It's their safety response, right? And then, of course, our monkeys here, social creatures. And so you'll notice maybe in the times when you're really stressed out, you don't want to socialize as much because you're not anchored in safety, which means you're not able to access the parts of your mind and body that are social in nature. This is really cool. I'm going to throw this in here as a little bonus. Even down to this is how much the nervous system and our state affects our ability to function. Someone who's perhaps had a traumatic experience in life, it actually changes their ability to hear. So this was me for a very long time. I would go out to social situations and when there's music and there's background noise and people are talking over each other, I used to sit there before I did a lot of this work. I would sit there and I wouldn't be able to hear anything. Right? And I'd sit there and be like, how are these people having a conversation? I can't hear a word of this. And then I started doing all of the nervous system work and suddenly I was able to hear these conversations. And then I found out that the state from which you're operating in actually changes the way we hear. So if you're in a state of survival, your eardrums are more attuned to being able to hear things like crunching leaves or like a growl, like a low growl of a predator. We're not able to hear more of those kind of like higher frequency noises, like the sound of someone's voice or music and those sorts of things. So that's how much our state actually impacts us on a day-to-day basis. And for the most part, we're completely unaware of it. Okay, so we're getting into a little bit of nuance here. If I had $1 for every time that a client told me that they have a fear that if they relax too much, they'll become lazy, I want to really hit home that what most people think I'm referring to when I talk about relaxation is actually disassociation. So relaxation is your ventral vagus state. Relaxation is bringing more of you to a situation. It's presence, it's magnetism. You know those people when they walk into a room and everyone just sort of, you can't help but notice them because they're so here? That's the state of relaxation. That's someone who is in their ventral vagus state. Versus disassociation, which is actually your dorsal vagus state. It's the freeze response. It's get me out of here. So I want you to just, I think I've just spelled disassociation wrong there. I'm not sure that looks, it looks wrong. Notice the difference, right? Because I think a lot of people fear relaxing. How often do we hear it? Oh, I want to go on a nice relaxing holiday, just an escape. That's actually disassociation. That's not relaxation. So subtleties, playing in nuance here. So where you create from determines what you create, not only in your outside world, but also with what's going on in your body. I'm going to say that again for impact. Where you create from determines what you create. So to finish off, I want to share with you a way that you can start to really identify ahead of time your nervous system responses and how to shift out of them. So this is something that I share with my clients in my signature program, Rewire the Nervous System, and I'm giving it to you here as a little bonus. So you might want to draw up, and feel free to take a photo of this if you want. You might want to draw up your own version of this and think of this as a living document that you work on over time. We've got here, and I'm just mindful of time. Yep, beautiful. We've got here your 3 states: ventral vagus, sympathetic, dorsal, or in other words, safety, fight or flight, freeze. Your fight or flight, I'm putting it down as the same thing here because they're very similar. It's just that one is, I want to protect myself and defend, and one is get me out. So hopefully you've already attuned a little bit to some of what goes on in your body emotionally and thought-wise in terms of when you're accessing these different states. From there, you're also going to, over time, notice the behaviors that come up. So again, prime example for me, I know when I go into dorsal vagus, it's a learnt response from witnessing my dad do it when I was a youngster. I know that I can turn to food, right? Food becomes my way. For a lot of us, it's social media, scroll. For others, it's Netflix. For some, it's drugs, alcohol. So you want to start to note down over time as you observe it, what some of your behavioral patterns may be. This sets you up to be able to shift it, because I know for me that when I start to notice that I'm looking for food, I can go, oh, I'm dropping into a dorsal vagus response, right? Or chicken or the egg situation here. When I start to notice in my body that I'm feeling heavy and I'm feeling cold and I'm feeling a bit, that it's likely my old pattern's going to spring in of wanting to turn to the fridge. So the beauty of that is once we have an awareness of what our patterns are, we can start to interrupt the pattern. And this is where we start to rewire it. So again, I'll use myself as the example. Oh, I'm feeling heavy and lacking motivation, and it feels pointless and hopeless, and I'm useless and I'm doomed, right? There is no point. oh, I'm starting to go into dorsal vagus response. I can either at this point turn to what I would normally do, what's wired into me, what's patterned into me through repetition, and spend the day in bed, or turn to the fridge, or procrastinate and isolate. Or I can turn to the toolbox that I've created for myself over time and interrupt it. So I've caught the early stages through the sensations, the feelings, the thoughts that pop up. Now I interrupt it so that I don't turn to these self-destructive behaviors. And so for me, some of the things that I turn to is going out and grounding my feet in the earth, right? That adds energy for me. Muscle activation. So dorsal vagus is a response of, it's a lack of energy. So muscle activation, squeezing every muscle. If you do it now with me, squeezing every muscle, you'll feel it adds energy. Suddenly it's like a little, oh, I've got a little boost there. And so you will all, even if you're unaware of it, you will all have a natural toolkit that you go. For example, it could be Netflix, right? The difference is what's effective with where you want to end up and what's ineffective, right? So ideally, we're using practices that shift us up into ventral vagus state. Let me know if there's any questions on that. And so as a thank you for your time, I wanted to give you a little gift today. And that is free access to my Somatic Release at Home program. Now, this is all based on creating presence, right? So I talked about the difference of disassociation and the difference of relaxation. So Somatic Release at Home is bodywork based. There is no mindset stuff because, again, a reminder that only 20% of the nerve fibers run from the mind down to the body, which means that only 20% of my mindset only accounts for 20% of it. So I'm covering the 80% here that rarely gets looked at. And it is body-based practices to bring you back into a state of relaxation. And I'll just quickly show you here because a lot of people get tripped up here. When you go to access this discount code, it's going to look like this. So you'll see that it says $300. When you type in connection, see that red arrow? I want you to make sure that you click that and you'll see that it zeroes out there, right? So then it's free. And then you just go down, fill out your information, and you're good to go. Once again, it's not what we pray for, it's what we pray from. That's one of my absolute favorite quotes. I live by that. I have it typed up and stuck on my wall because it's never what we're asking for. If we're asking for health, it's not about us asking for health. It's about living from that. I'm going to say it again. It's not what we pray for. It's what we pray from. Your state determines your experience because you're only ever experiencing your own nervous system reflected back to you. And that's it. Do we have any questions? I think we've still got some time. So do we have any questions or key takeaways that anyone wants to share?
I'll share a key takeaway for today.
Yeah, please.
So around the ability to control it, you can have control over this. It doesn't need to control you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really the key, and it is a practice, nervous system regulation is a lifelong practice. But it's when we start to play in it, I think my experience and my clients' experience has been that you start to realize that life is actually just mirroring you, and in health and in all other facets of our life, like we get to choose our experience. And so it becomes fun. For me, nervous system regulation is fun because, when stresses pop up, I'm like, oh, how can I meet this? How can I meet this powerfully? Sam says, thank you. That was action-packed with so much info. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad to hear that. Very interesting and awesome. Thanks. Thank you.